Not all apes are created equal. If you're the type of player that says, I've got no aim, no brain, I'm a shotgun main, I'm gonna head straight down center lane, well, more than likely you are the true definition of what most people call an ape. The distinction between an ape and a smart ape is what we call alpha tactics. Now, one thing that I want to make sure that we don't get confused off the get-go is the nomenclature that we have behind this name. Alpha is not the size of your manhood. Alpha is what we describe as that smart aggression that you can throw at an enemy. It's a tool, just like anything else in the game, a mindset that you can approach an engagement with in order to benefit your team, as well as framework how you go about problem solving in order to improve upon what it is that you do. It's something that True Vanguard referred to as, like mentioned, smart aping. As you can see in his video here, he mentions the distinction between running straight at somebody and straight lining them, or being smart about when you're taking engagements and using cover. I think that distinguishment is important, and it's something that we will talk to in depth. If you're the type of player who likes to play aggressively and wants to learn how that you can improve upon that, or if you're the type of player that is sick of people running aggressive plays at you and you want to learn how to best combat it, this might help you out a little bit. Welcome back, Guardians, to another Dream Team video. I am your humble host, Misum777, and in today's video, based off of your demands for the subscriber voting pool that we put out, you guys wanted to see Alpha, and me being a man of the people, am more than happy to give it to you. Let's first talk about what we consider the textbook definition of an alpha. An alpha is positioned in the front line and is supposed to engage in initiation. Their primary responsibility is to pull aggro and get close quarter kills. They maintain frontline damage with the team with quick close quarter burst damage and are proficient in initiation and movement. And one thing I want to say here, like I mentioned at the intro, is that all apes are alphas, but not all alphas are apes. The distinction is how tactical you are about it. Yes, being a shotgun main, being aggressive is a tactic. It is very important to certain tactics as well. In Overwatch, dead game lol, it was what we consider the dive meta. There's been games in things like Rainbow Six Siege where running something with a shield up in front can be good for the rest of your team. That initiation can be crucial for team-centered strategies. In fact, a lot of metas around all games have been defined by how well an alpha is able to take advantage of it and how well the opposite roles are able to play against it. Alpha roles are probably the easiest to get into because they're the simplest to understand. I'm going to get up in my opponent's face and do a bunch of damage really fast and kill as many things as possible. This is primarily where the difficulty comes for the players who distinguish themselves from being smart and aggressive in alpha and the people who just play ape. Apes will get into it with very low engagement into actually the depth of what it is that they are doing. Alphas will be able to understand everything that they're able to perform for the team. Before we get too deep into this, I would highly recommend you go watch our first video. It'll be the very first link that you will see in the description down below. I'll also pin it in the comments section. A lot of this will begin to make a little bit more sense if you've seen that video, as well as I would ask if you could consider subscribing. We're a very small channel and a group of friends, and every subscription means the world to us. If you could maybe share us with your friends and have them do the same, that is how we grow, and that is awesome. So let's roll forward. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about how it performs on its own with no team support. Alphas do fantastically, of course, in close quarter engagement, and they do really well in chaotic situations. People who are just naturally good at understanding alpha moves will do well in situations where there's a lot happening. They can take advantage of people's general inability to keep up with them, as well as using the tools that they have at their disposal to capitalize on the general confusion and chaos that's occurring. In more open situations or against teams that are doing a good job of playing defensively, they're gonna struggle. It seems to just be kind of natural that way. Let's talk about how it benefits the team and how the team can benefit you. Like mentioned, Alpha's primary job is to pull aggro. You can do your job as an aggressive player without firing a single shot, just by being a blip on the enemy's radar. If you're able to do what one of our members called deform the enemy team, you're doing your job as an alpha well. If you can put pressure on the team on the enemy team in such a way that they aren't in a position that they want to be in, or they're having to put too many mental tacks, as Cammy Cakes referred to it in our last video, it gives your team the opportunity to capitalize on the general chaos, confusion, and the pulled aggro, the pulled attention away from them. One of the common things I see from time to time when discussing things like apes or any of the roles in general, alpha, beta, gamma, omega, is why should I specialize so hard into this specific idea, the specific strategy? And it really comes back down to the idea of being able to perform one job really well rather than being able to perform every job okay. If you've got an enemy team that is doing one thing really well and you don't have anything that can really stop it, you've got everything that's just kind of an okay spot, you're going to generally struggle. But even if you have just one person who has that tools that you need, you can prop up that person in order for them to really slay out. For this case, if you've got a team that's very, very heavy backline sniper type plays, or they're just generally being way more aggressive than they might need to be and they're not smart about it, a good alpha can do an excellent job with the support of his team of completely annihilating it. In this game right here, as you're seeing on screen, I was able to get not one, but 2 Ghost in the Night medals in Iron Banner, as well as a We Ran Out of medals, or their equivalent of it. It was fantastic, and the only reason I was able to do that is because this team was clearly not coordinated. They had no idea how to handle my aggression, and I had a fantastic team supporting me. When we specialize into a specific strategy, into a specific loadout, it allows us to do our job really, really well. It's kind of the same idea of the old idea of an assembly line. Rather than have one person try to build an entire car, you have each single person do a small part of building that car. They can just be really good at that one particular job, and the car gets done a lot faster. One thing that is important to point out is that despite this specialization, your weapons do not define your role. The role, on the other hand, defines the weapons. For example, in the game that you're seeing here, same game where I got those 3 gold medals, I'm running a scout rifle in the alpha role. This is the Mida multi-tool. It's probably the most alpha of these scout rifles, but nevertheless, it's worth noting that the Mida multi-tool, being a fantastic long-range tool, also works really well for this particular build, and the way that I'm using it is to apply alpha pressure at any range. It essentially supplies me with a certain level of versatility that I need for my alpha playstyle, despite it not being what you would consider a true alpha's weapon. One thing to keep in mind for alphas, and we'll talk about each of these for every other successive role that we end up doing, but you're generally going to be getting a lot of kills. That's your job. Your job is to be the thing up front. You're typically going to get your hands on a little bit of everything. Now, your KD may not be great, and you want to try to push for something at least breaking even at the very, very least. And if you can push anywhere above that, great. I say if I'm able to perform at a 2.5 KD and get a whole bunch of kills, like 40 plus kills or so, I am really, really doing my job. Especially when the rest of my team has a fantastic KD behind it, because that means despite me dying a little bit more than they are, am able to break open that fight and essentially be that flashbang for them to be able to do what they need to do and really prop up what they're trying to do. But it's not all puppies and unicorns in the alpha role. There are plenty of ways that can shut it down and counter it. And if you've skipped to this point in the video because you are curious about it, let me cue you in on this a little bit. The gamma role, which will hopefully be one of the next 2 videos that we do on this topic, is a fantastic counter to the alpha role. Gammas specialize in defense, area control, and so on and so forth. Sort of if you want a cookie cutter loadout for them, that's like the Pulse Fusion Rifle if you're playing Destiny 2. Are fantastic at shutting down alphas. They're philosophically opposed to one another, which is important to understand. Whenever we're discussing anything involving the Wolfpack, we are thinking about it in terms of a mindset. Weapons, of course, like we mentioned, can help the role, but they don't define it. It really comes down to how you end up using it. If you're the type of whack job that wants to take a sniper rifle in close quarter environments and try to snipe and then melee somebody, you can play an alpha role that way. It's just going to be a lot more difficult. So, back to topic. the gammas are philosophically opposed to what the alpha is doing. Their general strategy, their general mindset is to play defense and to hard counter what the alpha is playing. So if you're seeing a bunch of teams that are playing things like a load of auto rifles, fusion rifles, and are generally playing further on the defense, not exposing themselves, as well as not trying to stay so far in the back as to try to snipe you, you might find yourself having a difficult time. Another weapon that I should throw in here if you're playing Destiny is sidearms. Sidearms are an absolute fantastic tool if you are a Gamma player to shut down aggression. Alphas, of course, do have things that they counter of their own. If you've seen our first video, you know that this is the Omega roll. The Omega roll gets hard countered by the Alpha. And this is because when the Alpha is able to get in close range spaces, which is not hard for him because he has the movement and initiation tools in order to get into those places. He's literally designed by his specialization in order to do it. Once he's inside, the Omega can really not do very much. That's not to say that he can't, or he can't have some kind of backdoor option, but typically speaking, he's going to have a much harder time. If the Omega, let's say, has one contingency plan for close quarter, the Alpha typically has 3 to match it. Let's now move on to how you, as an ape, can move into the Alpha mentality, or if you already are playing Alpha, how you can possibly improve that play. Let's talk about first that mindset. One thing that I cannot really describe unless you start doing it is the gut instinct and optimism that you have to have going into the Alpha role. You really have to just have this instinct on being able to be aggressive on stuff. It is a certain level of confidence that you have to have going into it, which is why typically sometimes those Alpha players can be a little bit toxic, because they almost in a way are required to generate a certain level of confidence in order to do what it is they need to do. And when somebody shuts them down out of it, it can be not pretty. Now, just as a side note, fellas, don't be toxic. If you're getting countered, learn, adapt from it. Adjust your playstyle, adjust what it is you're doing, talk with your team. Don't get toxic. That's just a side note. So, like I said, it requires a certain level of gut instinct in order to perform what it is that you're going to do. I'd also like to point out that, you won't really know it until you get into it. And if you have seen this, drop it in the comment section. But there's almost like a musical rhythm that you can get into in your mind when you're doing your job correctly. When you're playing the Alpha role correctly, it almost feels like a beat to a song. It just feels right. You'll know it when you get it. When you start getting to that mode where you're just slaying, you're in what we call flow state. I'll link a video to that as well. You'll know what I'm talking about. But that's those two things to keep in mind, is to get that gut instinct and confidence to do what it is you need to do, and then start looking for ways to insert yourself into that rhythm and that flow state once you start doing that snowball effect, as it were. The first kill gets you the second, gets you the third, gets you the fourth, and so on. Another thing that alphas are absolutely fantastic at doing, and you will find yourself doing better if you start capitalizing on this, is taking advantage of enemies that are on their heels. Enemies that you've already bopped in the mouth and they're trying to recover, if you can continuously apply pressure to them, you'll find yourself generally doing better. If you can keep them in a position where they're constantly trying to recover, trying to get their units back in order, you're going to have a better time, because you're just going to constantly keep this snowball rolling of them not being able to recover. On the flip side of that, if you see that the enemy team has been smart enough, has pulled back far enough, has been able to recollect themselves enough so that they're able to now defense you, be smart and be reactive, and seeing, all right, they're back in working order, I need to slow down and wait for my team in order to keep this up. But until that point, play opportunistically. Continuously try to push the advantage as much as your team and the enemy team will allow you to do. Slow down once you see that they've started to get their feet underneath them, reset with your team, and engage again. Some pitfalls to keep in mind if you're an alpha player. Some things that I see all the time. First and foremost is the disconnect from the rest of your team. What you see a lot of the times is alpha players who will run out. I'm guilty of this as well. As an alpha main, I am 100% guilty of this. Pushing up way too far, and even if I'm doing well, my team may be getting slaughtered. If I'm an individually good player but my team is not doing well, we are going to lose. Sometimes you'll have to pull back on the reins of being an alpha and play a little bit more on the defense because your team needs it. Don't disconnect from your team. Continuous communication is absolutely vital. Another thing on that same topic, poor communication. If you're getting ready to engage into a zone and you tell nobody, more than likely you're about to get slapped. Even if you pull out that kill or those few kills, that team that you might have just put into danger because of your reckless behavior might have not been better off for it. You might have actually even traded negatively because of it. Good communication is vital, especially at higher levels of play, in order to make highly aggressive plays work. The higher and higher you go up the chain in terms of skill, the more difficult aggressive plays become, the more communication it is going to require from you and your team in order to do well. Another thing that can happen in that is that same idea of getting greedy. You might see an opponent who's weak, and everything inside of you might be just dying to get your teeth sank into them. You gotta hold yourself back if at the end of the day, and like the ends don't justify the means sort of deal, right? If at the end of the day it does not get you what it is you're looking for, or you trade 1 for 1, which is just neutral, that doesn't do you any good, right? Don't get greedy. If you find yourself trading 1 for 1 a lot, if you see that your kill count at the end of the game is like 1.2, 1.3, you're probably getting too greedy. So you need to slow down and you need to reassess how it is you're being aggressive. Now let's talk about some specific weapons and builds that you can try out for both Warlock, Hunter, and Titan. The one that I would recommend highly, I cannot recommend this enough, and it's probably going to be a shame because most people have probably clicked away at this point, is my favorite build of all time, Warp Speed. This is a Warlock build. This revolves around the Astrocyte Verse, Mida, an Energy Shotgun, and Nova Warp. All you have to do is run Blink, run anything that you're comfortable with for shotguns as long as it has Quick Draw, the Mida Multi-Tool, and the Astrocyte Verse. You are the fastest Warlock in the Crucible. Try to give yourself some benefits for things like shotgun scavengers. Traction is also important. That general stuff, obviously you can kind of figure it out once you get there. It's not too difficult because you're just going to be buffing the weapons that you have, as well as playing into things like recovery, mobility, whatever you're comfortable with. Fantastic. This will really give you an idea of how speed and initiation can benefit the alpha playstyle. If you want to just dip your toe into it in order to understand that side of the alpha, I highly recommend it. This is, not joking, space crack cocaine. It is so much fun and it is so addictive to play. For the Hunter, this is another style of alpha build we call the Chimera build. This is a build that actually was released Wednesday of this week, so depending on when you're watching this, this should be a pretty recent upload. The Chimera build is a build that centers around the Monte Carlo, the Graviton Forfeit helmet, Bottom Tree Night Stalker, and a good shotgun. What this allows you to do is, for almost every engagement, you're allowed to be invisible because of the Monte Carlo and the Graviton Forfeit, giving you your melee back and keeping your invisibility up. This is one of the few builds that incorporates some level of support into it as well, and if you're more comfortable with an auto rifle, this might be good. This mimics the same idea of the Astrocyte Verse build, the Warp Speed build. It gives you a free open initiation. Just like with Astrocyte, how you can flank really well, this build allows you to flank really, really well because you're invisible and they won't see you coming. You're allowed to kind of take these shots that they're not really anticipating it to be from because you're off their radar. As for Titans, this one is probably something that's a little bit of a sore spot now. I created this build way back before the NTS Ward meta was a thing, but actually worked pretty well even after the nerfs. This is what we call the Bumblebee. This runs a swashbuckler pulse rifle and a 1-2 punch with Grave Robber shotgun. You run that with the Antaeus Wards on Top Tree Striker. What you can do is you can slide, cancel it into a shoulder charge, which will give you an invincible shoulder charge. This plays very much into the just get it done close quarter burst idea of the alpha. If you want something that's easy to understand and it synergizes well with a very straightforward tactic, you can be an absolutely fantastic breaching tool with this build. The links to all these videos will be in the description below. I've got a lot of links apparently, so you'll see them all listed there. Other than that, some generic build ideas. You want to have perks that give you handling, such as Quick Draw. Things like Swashbuckler do you well. Slide Shot, of course, is great. Anything like that. Hand cannons will do you well. Shotguns, SMGs if they ever become a thing again. Auto rifles are good. Anything that can help you within the close quarter space. You are highly, highly spec'd for aggression. If you can give yourself some level of movement speed bonus, such as the Transversive Steps, the Stompies, or the Dune Marchers, those will all do well as well. Anything you can give yourself that gives you that really shocking initiation, that kind of surprise attack initiation that you can foist upon your enemy team, is going to do you well. Anything along those lines, melee centered, everything like that will do well. Feel free to drop it into the comment section down below if you have a build idea of your own that you would like to propose as a sort of alpha playstyle, and let me know both in the subscriber poll, be sure to subscribe, and the comments down below what type of role you want to see next. After this next one, we're going to start including some tactics in here, so, you know, this next one will be sort of like the lead up to it. So be sure to let me know in the comment section. Thank you all so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to subscribe and all that goodness. Bless your faces, and deuces.